Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Method to Our Madness. I'm Stacey Marola, PhD, and I'm here with my co-host Bill Pate.
Hello.
Hello, and we have a very special guest today, my good friend Anna Sandoval, PhD.
Hello.
And we're talking to you from Guatemala today. I guess so. I'll let Anna introduce herself and tell us a little bit more about your background.
So I am a PhD in sociology, which led me to many places, but my latest work is around UX research. But I started this world as a qualitative researcher. So I've worked in a bunch of places, and currently I am taking my practice all that I learned in the US to Guatemala to work with micro and small businesses so that they can create a better online or a better digital experience for themselves and for their clients. So that's what I'm doing.
That's
That's
great.
really cool. Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah, so could you tell us, I think there's a lot of confusion out there about like what UX research is, and then there's a lot of acronyms. It's like UX, CX. I think I've even seen an EX, which I'm like, isn't that redundant? I don't know. So,
So the UX stands for user experience. And what that means is that we want to create an overall experience with either a tool, an app, a website, or a product that's digital. That means that we want to understand how people use and interact with the tool. And then the other one that gets conflated is the user interface work, which is much more design based, which is the piece that is about making the tool pretty. But that making a tool pretty does not mean that the tool is useful for the user. So the two have to live together between making something useful and usable for the user and making it pretty. But for me, making it pretty is not as important as something that a user can navigate and use successfully.
So like Apple products, is that
Mhm.
like the quintessential example of like, well, ideally, both of those
Mhm.
things happening?
Correct.
Okay.
They spend a lot of time testing what that experience is going to be. And the other piece of this is that you want to create stuff that requires very little instruction, that is very intuitive. So something can look pretty on the website, but can be totally confusing for a person.
Okay. So it's like, yeah, so it looks great until you start using it. And then you
Yes,
have problems or complaints or I can't find this or
or it can be brilliant idea, but very poorly executed. So let me
hmm,
give you a really good example. The Guatemala government requires that everyone fills out this form, which Stacy based,
I filled it out.
and this is your immigration form. It used to be by paper, but now it's all gone digital. Brilliant idea, because who wants to fill out a piece of paper and then it goes somewhere and it gets digitized? So I am not opposed. It has a little QR code. Here's the problem: the execution is horrible. Stacy had to fill it out, and she can attest to the fact that it is very complicated to
It's
do it.
very complicated.
And some of the translation is fully there. And so any user would say, oh, this is super cool, like me. And then you get into the system, and what happens is most people are filling out this in their phone
Yes.
because you do not go out with your laptop to check in and then you do the form. So, but the system was designed to fit into a computer screen, and then it gets squished and weird, and you have to like move the the screen horizontally in order
right.
to fill the whole thing out. So you see how that is like it was. I think it's a great idea. I love the concept, but then I see people struggling, like my dad, who's 76, is
Mm,
like, how am I supposed to do this? And
right.
it is very, very challenging. And then, of course, my particular interest is in individuals that have lower literacy and especially lower digital literacy.
Mm,
And lots of people are traveling that are like that, lots of
yeah.
retirees. And So then you end up with this situation where you saw the line, there's a
Yes.
massive line of people trying to get help
Oh,
because they can't fill out the form.
right.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a great example to me that it was a really good idea, really poorly executed. So they absolutely did their research around what needed to happen digitally on their back end, but they forgot or failed or didn't think through what is the user experience research we need for this to be useful to our users who are tourists, lots of returnees that are coming back to visit,
Hmm.
and backpackers. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
that's the population you see, especially this time of year, where it's a massive influx of people. So yeah, I can talk about that form for a long time.
that,
And Stacy can
that is a
tell
great
you.
example.
It was really, yeah, it was challenging to fill out. I agree. I was like, wait, because I was doing it on my phone, and then it's like,
Right.
oh, I gotta scroll over to the hearth, wait, okay, there's the little thing to hit, and then, and then had to make sure I saved my QR code so I could show it to people, and I'm like,
Oh my
taking
goodness. Yeah.
screenshots of it to make sure I had it to
That
But
show
what if
people.
you didn't?
well, no, you have to refill it.
You have to refill it.
So here's the thing. I hope that people here who design this listen to this. So then you get to the last part of it where you get a QR code. Brilliant. You have a QR code. You can now enter it. They'll scan it, all that stuff. But the QR code cannot be saved to your wallet.
Yeah.
And so you have to take a screenshot. And what if you don't know how to take a screenshot, which happens to lots of people?
Absolutely.
Or you accidentally, close the window, then it sends you an email. There's a portion of the population that do not have email. Or they don't know how to get their email to their phone in their phones.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some people, it's like, I only look at my email when I'm
Mhm.
on my computer at home. I
Yep.
don't look at it on my phone. I don't understand these people because I like to check my
Yeah.
email. But yeah, if you don't have that set up already, then you're asking somebody to do it while they're out and about, standing in line.
Yeah.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
customs.
That's at
Oh my
customs. So
goodness.
now you're getting nervous. So let
Yeah.
me let
Right.
me transition to the other piece of like a lot of UX. It's like one of the really cool things about UX is you develop this personas, which in qualitative research we also talk about the ideal type or a persona in research. And these personas as are what we're talking about right now is the user that doesn't check their email, the user that does not know how to navigate this form, this super complicated form. The user that travels constantly, so they're good, they're fine, no matter what or how complicated it is, they're going to be fine. And so what we create is sort of the path that each type of user will go through to complete the task. So what I find super interesting is each one of these personas, because we're people, we're actually taking a look at how a chunk of population reacts or interacts and saying this is the persona. So you see like there's this qualitative piece, you look at a pattern of behavior and you create this persona. We then test that persona or test with these populations. We say we need to talk to people that have low digital literacy or they don't have a smartphone because they don't want a smartphone or they don't know how to use how to do a screenshot. All of these different personas are tested so we know what needs to be improved for different kinds of people, and at the end the hope is that we'll have a system that works for all the personas.
So do the persona, are they like a priori? Like, are you like, okay, you theoretically say, okay, these people are like this, or did you like test, like say, okay, let's give this app on like initial test to like 50 people and then see what they do and then get personas out of that?
We can do that. I think there's the way I think of it is there's different ways to get into that persona.
Okay.
That initial testing, that sort of wild testing, or going back to the immigration form, just doing a good old observation at the airport will give you enough information of what kinds of people. Like there's a person that does not care. They just get on that immigration line and then they're stopped and they're told, you do not have the form. That's one type of people. We put them over here
Yeah.
and we test.
Yeah.
I think this is where qualitative work comes. The ability to sit there and observe behavior and create this, different groupings that then allow us to interact or allow us to think about what does this group of people need.
Hmm.
Like the people that are low literacy, we need to have 20 screens for them to be able, and a person per screen for them to be able to fill this out. That's kind of how we think about those personas.
Oh, that's great. So it's like a little bit of experimental
Mhm.
research where you're just in situ figuring out, okay, here's the real situation. Who's going to be in here? And then what
Mhm.
kind of problems are they going to encounter? So is this where like a lot of beta testing happens, where you work through some stuff and then it's like, let's try it in the field for a little bit?
The personas come before you
Okay.
do the beta testing. And in part, and so this is kind of where the cool part of UX comes because there's the quant people that will be able to tell you this this is where the user drops off. This is where they lose it and they say, I don't want to fill this form. I'm just going to get help when I get there.
Mm,
That quantitative work will be able to see the massive amount of data and tell us, the qual people, we think this is where the problems are in the form, or this is where the app are people getting stuck. People are, just losing patience with how complicated this is.
hmm.
Like the CV, no, I'm not going to name names, but there's, like pharmacies that have very poor user experience.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, oh yes, we all have experienced that. So this is kind of where the quant people can tell us, we think this is where people are getting stuck. What the qual people will do is explain why they're getting stuck.
Right.
So quant can give you lots of information, but they will never be able to tell us why person A, person B, or persona A, persona B is getting stuck, which is the
Mixed,
beauty of working in a qual team.
mixed
Mixed
methods.
methods.
Yay!
Very cool. Yeah, so you do so with the testing, you try observations. Do you interview people as well
Like
usually? Or
I am a fan as a qualitative trained person. I am a fan of the good old fashioned observation.
okay.
I mean, we've all done observation in qualitative work, and if you had a good methods experience in grad school, you will have done qual work because that's what we teach. That's how they teach. So I really think it's really important to do observation. The piece that I find very different from between the traditional qual and the UX is that you can do observations by having people do or work through the app or the tool that you're giving them. So those observations can be done online. Those observations can be depending on what you're doing. So I've done a lot of work where I ask the user to kind of walk through a system. And the UX work is task oriented. So you want like we pull the priorities of like what do we want this user to be able to do through this experience. And so then you say, I want the user to be able to switch languages, for example, or fill out this form, or find this particular FAQs. Those are very task oriented, which for me was a little bit hard to transition because as a qual person, trained person, I was all like free for all, like let's observe,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just
let's
observe.
let's
Yeah.
observe what's
Yeah.
happening. And in UX, because that times are also much reduced, you want to see how a task is completed. So that to me is the main difference between the what I call the observational grounded theory qualitative work that I
Mm,
was trained in and UX research. It's very task oriented, and the designers and the engineers will often ask, can people do this?
right.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like the task-oriented stuff, it's almost getting into so when I was in graduate school briefly, in a PhD program, so I was in a community clinical program, but the sister program was human factors. And so
Well,
it seems like there's a lot of like deliberate, planned experimentation where it's like, okay, well, let's have, 6 subjects go through each of these like 5 different conditions, and then we'll see, of these different tasks or different directions, how successful they are.
but that requires doing that kind of task oriented with a real person,
Right. Yeah.
requires the toolkit of a qualitative researcher.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if you put an engineer and no, no dice, no, not
No
talking,
shade.
no shade of engineers, work with many of them, but if you put an engineer there, they'll be like, do this, do that, because they are task oriented. That's what
Yeah.
they want. As a qualitative person, you have the toolkit to create that connection with people, to say, hey, there's nothing wrong if you can't do it, we're just testing this, it's not your fault, it's our fault. Like all of that ability to connect with a participant and to ask questions and to bring back when they're telling you the story of how they went somewhere else, or how they're, I mean, I've had situations where they tell us, like my granddaughter does this for me, and so that, like, I
Right.
don't end the interview there. I continue saying, oh, so why does your granddaughter do this for you?
Yeah.
And so those are all very key pieces of the training of qualitative and how it comes into UX research, which is why they recruit qualitative people to do UX research.
That's a good segue into. I think there is some confusion about the difference between qualitative research and quantitative, and particularly in like survey creation, because I've heard some people say qualitative survey, and it's like, no, a survey isn't qualitative research. So maybe we could go talk a little bit about that toolkit
Yeah.
and sort of like the techniques of qualitative research.
So
Yeah.
I worked in two labs where they did pre-testing work for
Mm.
surveys. And, often people start thinking about the pilot initially, but there's like 3 steps behind that. The steps, and generally those are qualitative steps. Like the first step is you have a questionnaire that comes from people who have expertise, and you look at it, and that's where the expert review comes in. Like, this is a perfect world, by the way. The expert review comes in, and you have a group of experts on survey design that go through it and say, oh, this question is like, yes, we want to know if you had this, different diseases, but you cannot put all the diseases in a yes no question. Like, you cannot say, have you had the flu? Have you had COVID? And have you had a respiratory illness? Yes or no?
I've never seen those where they have the long list, where they have the long list of, have you had any of these? And you flip over the form and it's like, oh my God, so many
Oh my
questions.
Yeah.
God.
This is where the survey design qualitative people come in and say, listen, this is not going to work, because a person they don't know what you're asking specifically. So that's the expert review. After the expert review, we actually sit with potential participants, see how like UX and participants and sort of the survey world use participants, and kind of go through the survey and say, hey, what do you understand this question to be asking you? Because you want to connect what the question is asking, that and it's providing the right data.
Hmm.
There's plenty of examples in which a question is asked and then you get data back, and it's craziness. It's like, why are 80% of Latinos bisexual? Well, because the translation was terrible. And people are understanding bi as I, you know, I have sex with the person of the other gender, not as I have attraction or sex with both genders. So again, this is where good testing comes in. Then,
Hmm.
of course, we give it to the quant people, and they program and they do, and data comes back in that survey that went public, and they can do the analysis. But the qualitative people are key to good survey design. That's why you don't see horrible questions, or sometimes you see them because they will not listen. But the goal really is to make sure that, going back to the user, the person who's answering the survey, understands what they're being asked to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff too. So for a little over 10 years, I was at the American Psychological Association, and our office was in charge of the surveys that went out. So it went out to people who recently got their PhD. So there was a graduate like student or like recent graduate student survey. And that was with like young professionals getting into the field.
Mhm.
So we're asking about graduate school debt, and then also starting salary. So we time it for early career people. But because there was a hurdle to doing surveys, this is way back in like 2002, we got to be the gatekeepers for all survey research that anybody in the organization wanted to do with any of their population. And so we noticed over time that people were starting to use like online surveys on their own. And so they would just develop these
Mhm.
200 item surveys. And they're like, hey, so we want to field this. And we're hoping to get like 50 people to fill it out. Can you just send this out? And it's like, well, let's talk about the aim of the survey, the purpose, because surely you don't need all these 200 items. I mean, especially if you're not going to actually act on it. And so it was just hard work for many years trying to get, people to do responsible like survey work. But then, years later, we lost control of that, and it was decided by the powers that be that the different directorates could do whatever they wanted. They didn't have to go through that office. And so then it just became this like, Wild West or something. I'm sure they've
But I
reined
think
it in a little bit, but
this is, I think, where the you can see the power of pretesting. You have
Mhm.
a bunch of if you, I mean, I don't know if this was done, but had this sets of questions and real people being asked, what do you think this question is asking you? And the
Mhm.
other key one, do you think you have answered this question already? Like pages
Mhm.
ago. This is repetitive. And so that is where the power of it comes. And oftentimes, this kind of qualitative research is considered to be extra, or that you give the researchers, problems that don't exist. The truth is, if you're doing good pre-testing with qualitative methods, well-developed qualitative methods, it's going to be great. I mean, some people will still get confused.
Sure. There's always going to be somebody, right?
Yeah, and it's often me, the confused person. But it's not because I'm confused; it's because I know how pretesting works and how to read these questions. So I'm the
Mm.
person that says, "This is unclear. This question totally unclear," or like this response option unclear. But that's, to me, shows how important it is to not just the question but the response options, that people understand the response options so that they can pick the one that fits their experience.
No, absolutely. I like that. Yeah. I mean, Stacey and I both do a lot of this. We constantly flip, although we're both primarily quantitative, we definitely flip back and forth between qualitative and quantitative. Would you agree,
Yeah,
Stacey?
I'd agree. Yeah, I mean, I've done cognitive labs. That's sort of the process of like speaking aloud, which Honest touched on. Is
Hmm.
you have a participant in a room and you give them the sample questions and you ask them, what does this mean to you? What does this word mean? So, but yeah, and yeah, for folks out there, construct validity, make sure
Yeah.
that you're measuring
Hmm.
what you intend to measure. So,
And this is, I think, where you're basing teams with qualitative and quantitative people really become, to me, the most powerful. Because when you're able to create these relationships between qualitative and quantitative, then it becomes a conversation
Hmm.
about what does the quantitative team or the survey team, or what does that team need, what is the question, what is their goal, and the qualitative people being able to come in and provide support for them to get those results.
Hmm.
right.
And that would be a really fantastic team.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because, like, from the flip side, on a quantitative level, you can't have a survey just of open-ended questions because it's impossible to analyze that, quickly. You'd have to code all the responses, and then, so or people put in stuff like, misspellings, even though it's the same answer, so
Mm,
so
yeah.
there is like a balance between, if you want to survey 10,000 people or whatever it is, like, if you have just open-ended questions, you can have a bunch of the, you know.
Yeah, and this is where I think it gets with some of the challenges of those two teams working together is because the qual people want open-ended questions. They're like, oh my God, I can get all this in-depth stuff. The quantitative people are like, this is going to be madness.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
madness. It's gonna be hours and hours of coding.
So, yes. And so it is an interesting conflict that allows us to see how there are ways to do this. I mean, I am a fan of good, write-ups, but I also have to be realistic that once a person gets to question 25,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're done.
Fatigue.
They're
Like,
Yeah.
done. Tired.
Yeah.
and
Cognitive
so
fatigue. Yeah.
yeah, and so then what data am I getting from those write-ups? And I think that's where we got to talk about constructs and we have to talk about quality of data. If I get one word or if 90% of people are saying nothing, then is that 10% representative? Or what can
Right.
I learn as a qualitative researcher from those 10 responses? So they may
Mhm.
not be representative, but they're telling me a story.
Yeah.
And that story can improve the data quality, the quantitative data quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the experience that Stacy and I have is that being more quantitatively oriented, we're recruited by evaluators
Mhm.
who are more like generalists. And if they know that there's a need for a quantitative aspect, then they hire us as like an expert. And I think the same for us too when we go after new projects where it's like, oh, we need somebody who has like some UX experience or some deep, particular qualitative like aspect that is clear in the RFP. And we make sure to get somebody because it's like I may know a little bit, but I'm not an expert like you are in, this like pre-testing and stuff.
But I go back often, and I've said this numerous times, all those skills are come from that very foundation of qualitative research.
Hmm.
So in my days in graduate school, I did observational, open-ended, did my research for a year and a half. That's the kind of training I received.
Hmm.
Nowhere in that process did I interact with tools, like with online tools. I mean, online was also at its infancy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like doing online surveys was at its infancy. So you know, I don't know, we were probably not interacting in the same way as people now in graduate school that are having to interact with it. And there's a whole story here that I didn't start interacting with online tools or digital tools until I went and worked somewhere where they were testing how people responded with ACASI tools. And so the ACASI is this particular way in which, I mean, this is so old school. We would hook up a headset into a computer and the questions that were considered very sensitive, then people would put on the headphones and be able to respond on the laptop. But I mean, this is old school. You should see your face.
No, no, I actually remember a lot of this. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
the old school stuff.
Yeah, this is old school. And then
Oh, okay.
other tools. But that was really my first interaction with this sort of how does the person eh, experience this really kind of interesting, weird thing that in the middle of a survey, they're like, oh, wow, put on this headset, and you're going to answer the question that is on the screen. And they would have to answer the question on the screen. That really was the first time I thought, holy, we need to figure out if these people are actually understanding the instructions, they're understanding what this question really means, and how do they feel about using this computer that someone just turned around for them and told them to fill it in. And little by little, I kind of built this idea that my main interest is people that have, like I said, low literacy and low digital literacy, because I think those are the individuals that are being left behind with all of these tools. And so that's kind of where I focus. Like my whole thing is, if my grandmother who had a second grade education can use this tool, then I'm going to be satisfied. If not, I think we need to work on it. And
Absolutely.
that is
Yeah.
absolutely key for me, is that I want the person who has the most challenges to be able to be successful. And then when online surveys became the thing,
Hmm.
it was sort of a natural process to getting to that. And that brings in the complication of doing qualitative work, like with one person, where you get in, you sit in a table and you tell them, oh, what do you think this question means? To how do they interact with the online tool? And I think that is very much UX research. So the UX research, we think about it as this, thing that it's out there with technology and the big tech companies, but really many of us have been doing UX work, although it's not called UX work.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
I think that good UX research cannot exist without good, well-trained qualitative researchers. That's just, to me, the key to it. I've seen it often that people are UX researchers, but they don't have the qualitative toolkit, and that is a disadvantage for them.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Mhm.
This was great.
This is
Yes,
great. See?
this was fun.
This is great. Yay!